Hello beautiful people and welcome to another video. I am here to do my February wrap up and I want to start it a little bit different. Usually I go through with you like word by word the reading stats of the month, but I've decided to film like a little clip and just insert that so you can kind of take your time, pause it if you want to, and kind of go through that at a pace that I'm hoping will mean that the video itself will be less to edit. So we shall see how that works. I was originally just going to chuck pictures in, but I thought let me just record it a little bit. So here are the reading stats for the month of February. So I was super excited with everything that I managed to get to because I managed to read I think 15 books in total. I've also started to do like a little book tower and writing like the books and stuff of you guys, as you guys would have seen, as well as tallying all the star ratings. So I had so many 5 stars, which is I was really happy about. I also managed to read pretty much nearly everything that I had on my TBR, even the 2021 carryovers. I've got one more book left on that one, which is Conference of the Birds by Ransom Briggs, which I didn't get to, but everything else that I had that I wanted to read is all read, so I'm super happy about that. I've read a few books from the library. I've got some new releases, some new to me books like that I've recently accumulated. And yeah, I think that's everything that I wanted to go through. It's a little bit weird me not going through the actual like this is how many of this that I read. It's just a bit hazy in my head now, but yeah, I very much enjoyed it. So I took part in a couple of buddy reads, and so yeah, I'll let you guys know when those books pop up which ones were the buddy reads. Also want to include a March TBR, or just a very loose what I hope to pick up in that month, and yeah, I'll include that at the end. So starting with a load of the library books, so I shall be inserting pictures. I have read, so the first book that I finished in February was Blue Blood by Mallory Blackman and illustrated by Laura Barrett, and I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. It's YA fairy tale retelling and fantasy, published by Penguin Random House back in 2020, so it's more of a newer release, and this is basically a retelling of the story of Blackbeard, which, if you know that classic kind of old what would you call it, like a cautionary tale, is basically this wealthy man marries a woman and he goes away, and to kind of test her loyalty and trust, he tells her basically she can have the full run of the castle as long as she doesn't go into the basement or a secluded area where he doesn't want her to go, and he gives her the keys and everything for that, and saying, I'm trusting you, just don't go in that room. Curiosity gets the better of her, she goes in that room and she regrets that decision. So this is kind of taking that story and making it more of a modern day tale, which is very interesting. However, the Bluebeard character is now a woman. There's like modern day technology in it. There's also conversations on like not very nice relationships, controlling relationships, which I thought was quite well explored. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed the themes that it captured in this. I loved the silhouette art style. I thought that was a really funky design that I hadn't like been exposed to much before, so I thought it worked quite well for it, and I was definitely intrigued by the mystery and secrets of it all. As I say, the themes were very much enjoyable, and particularly that kind of very brief, but it was there, discussion of kind of like a controlling relationship. So yeah, that was the first book of February. Following that, I read The Wind in the Wall, which I gave a 4 stars, and this is by Sally Gardner, illustrated by Ravina Kai, and it is YA fantasy published in 2019 by Hotkey Books. This one, I'm gonna be honest, I can't remember exactly the plot point of it. All I remember it being was kind of like a ghostly story that I enjoyed. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, but it was more of a forgettable story for me. Like, thinking back at it now, I read this at the beginning of the month, and I'm now filming this on the 28th, the last day of February, so it's clearly not held a lot in my memory. However, I did really enjoy the writing style. It kind of reminded me of Edgar Allan Poe in tone. It had a very intriguing tale, again one that I can't really remember right now, but the illustrations in that was absolutely breathtaking. I did feel shortchanged with the length of the story, so I'm glad it's one that I borrowed out of the library and didn't spend my own money on, because I think I would have been kind of disappointed in the fact that it was just kind of like, I don't know, it was just lacked in substance in some way, and I felt like it could have had more depth overall, but as I say, kind of forgettable, but at the time definitely enjoyed it. After that, I picked up Ethel and Ernest, A True Story by Raymond Briggs, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. This is my first 5 stars, obviously, through February, and it was a really enjoyable book. This is a non-fiction memoir aimed at adults, I guess. Anyone could read it, really. Published in 2002 by Random House, and it is the story of Raymond Briggs, who is the creator of those silent short movies such as The Snowman, Father Christmas, all those kind of films. And it's basically the true story of his parents, from the kind of their meeting to his birth. There's World War II, there's a lot going in, and it's just spanning all their life. This was honestly such a beautiful immortalisation of their story. It's fascinating to see all the history and everything that the family had lived through and been through together, but the death scenes caught me again. Oh my god, such is life, but it's just so jarring. I actually had watched the movie of this a couple of years ago when it first came out, before reading it, and the death scenes in that caught me unaware. Like, I was not expecting that, and even though I knew it was coming in the written form of it, it just still really upset me, quite unsettling. But it's raw, it's real life, and I think it was beautifully done. After that, I went back to the world of The Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas, and I picked up the 4th book in the series, which is The Queen of Shadows. It's YA fantasy published back in 2015 by Bloomsbury. I feel like a lot of you guys probably know the kind of general gist of Throne of Glass, so I'm just going to kind of speed through my thoughts and feelings. So this was super addictive. I had worried that I wasn't going to be able to get into it as much as I hoped to, because it had been 8 years since I last read, was it Heir of Fire? Since I read the 3rd book, and I didn't really do any kind of refresher. I didn't go back and reread anything. I didn't even really watch any spoilery reviews or read any spoiler reviews, so I just went head first into this one, and you know what, I absolutely loved it. This was another 5 stars. It was easy to fall back into the world with all the characters. It did take me a little while, but it was still enjoyable. I didn't feel like I was struggling to keep up, if you know what I mean. The plot was exceptional. This was just such an epic journey. I'm hoping to pick up the next one relatively soon. I don't want to leave it another 8 years. That's just ridiculous. So yeah, I'm hoping to get through this series throughout the rest of the year. After that, I finished another library book, and that was Brightly Woven by Alexandra Bracken, adapted by Lee Dragoon and illustrated by Kit Seaton. And unfortunately, I gave this one a 2 out of 5 stars. It just it wasn't to my tastes. It's middle grade fantasy, and it's a graphic novel adaptation originally, a regular kind of form piece of novel. How would you describe that? I don't know. But this one was published in 2021 by Quercus Children's Books. So I think it originally came out in 2008 or something like that, and it was gonna be a series, but I think the publishers dropped it, so it never got revisited. So this was kind of exciting for the author to kind of come back to it and give it a new kind of lease of life. I thought the art was absolutely lovely. I really enjoyed it. It had an interesting magic with the colourful cloaks that was in this, and I realised that I've not actually told you what it's about. We're basically following this kind of, I would say it's like a medieval kind of world where there's like this political unsettlement, and there's a rumour that the attack on the country and the king wasn't by the people that everybody thought it was, and this wizard has the information that can stop all out war, and he comes across this little town that has our other main character in, who, I don't know, they just get on this journey and kind of try to stop shit from going down. It wasn't really anything that interested me, unfortunately, but it was alright, it was okay. It just wasn't, I wouldn't revisit it. I wasn't that interested in it, to be honest. Another library book, this one I read on my phone through the Borrow Box app, and that is When They Call You a Terrorist by Patrice Khan Colours. It's non-fiction YA, I would say. It's aimed at, published in 2020 by Canongate, and I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. This one, I read the adapted for young readers one, and it didn't abridge anything. In fact, it added more. It added like these prompting questions at the end of each chapter to get the readers to think more about not only the book and like review it and get those thoughts and feelings out, but the actual situations that were explored. And it's basically the beginnings of the Black Lives Matters movement and how that came to be, and like everything that went into it. It was absolutely fascinating. It felt personal and factual, but it just married together really well. I enjoyed those readers' questions at the end of each chapter. I think it helped me to form my own review on it a little bit better, like my written review, and it just felt very inspiring. I'd say the only kind of downfalls was that I would have loved to have captions under the photos. There's lots of pictures throughout it, and it's really interesting to kind of see like all the key players in the movement, but sometimes I felt like they were like random photos and they weren't necessarily in direct relation to what was being discussed at that moment. So I think a little caption underneath would have helped me just to kind of place what the picture was in relation, you know. And I also found that it jumped a little bit back and forth in time, which confused me because it wasn't, I found it wasn't exceptionally clear like that was happening, and I was like, wait, hold on a minute, but I thought this had happened, but now they're talking about a time before this has happened. It just threw me through a loop a little bit. Right, so although this is my second buddy read of the month, it's the one that I finished before because I fell a little bit behind of my other buddy read, and that is the buddy read with Deborah from Hills of Books on Instagram, and we decided to start Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. It's YA fantasy, published back in 2011 by Howdee-haie and Stoughton, and I feel like this is another OG fan favourite of, you know, YA fantasy. So I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars, and I'll read you the back just because I actually went into this not really knowing what the concept was, so I feel like I might do it an injustice trying to explain it. I don't want to give too much away. So in general, Karu has managed to keep her two lives in balance. On the one hand, she's a 17-year-old art student in Prague, and on the other hand, she's an errand girl to a monstrous creature who is the closest thing she has to family. Raised half in our world and half in elsewhere, she has never understood Brimstone's dark work, buying teeth from hunters and murderers, nor how she came into his keeping. She is a secret even to herself, plagued by the sensation that she isn't whole. Now the doors to elsewhere are closing, and Karu must choose between the safety of her human life and the dangers of a nearly destroyed world that may hold the answers she has always sought. So I definitely enjoyed the unravelling mystery that was kind of interlaced throughout the whole of the plot. I felt like it had a great use of timeline and flashback. Sometimes it's something that can be quite jarring if not done correctly, and I feel like in this one the examples are quite good and well done. I preferred the second portion to the first portion, where we had more of like an unveiling of sorts, more origins, and kind of the story was starting to make sense and fall into place. So that was definitely my preference, although I did enjoy it, the first half as well. And it had a great ending, super satisfying sequel bait. I don't feel like it's left us unsatisfied. It makes me want to pick up the next one. So yeah, that was really awesome. I didn't enjoy the insta love, although I kind of understood it when the plot released all of the secrets, and it's not an addictive kind of pull that I crave when I read YA fantasy. So although I am intrigued and want to read the second one, this one just, it felt like a really good setup, but it didn't have that lure, that kind of obsessive pull that something like this gave me, you know. But that is my thoughts on Daughter of Smoke and Bone. So the first technically buddy read of the month, which is the second one that I finished, was A Tale of Witchcraft by Chris Colfer, which is YA fantasy published in 2020 by Little Brown Books, and this is the second book in the A Tale of Magic series, which is currently just staying at a trilogy for now, and it's a sequel to the Land of Stories books. And I read this with Kat from Kat's Reading Corner, so I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars, which is a little bit upsetting because the first book in this new series I gave a 5 out of 5 stars, so it fell flat a little bit. But I definitely appreciated the more point of views from Lucy and kind of fleshing out her character a little bit more, kind of getting to know what was in her head a little bit more as well. Interesting plot around witchcraft and the witches, and kind of getting to see the other side of magic. But the things that really bothered me was that Emeralda was way overpowered. Like, this one really showed how much she can do just by turning things into emeralds and jewels, and I was like, that's just such an overpower, like, that's not fair, you know. And Bristol was just too overbearing in this. I understand why, again, plot, but I don't think it was justified enough. It was just annoying to read at times because of that. I also found that I was really like blasting through this, and then about halfway through I put it down for a couple of days. I just didn't feel this lure to pick it back up, and that made the second half difficult, and that's why I kind of like fell behind in the reading, in the days, like the pages per day. And I don't know, it just didn't kind of capture me in that second half, unfortunately. And yeah, those are my thoughts. Then I picked up a manga, and that is The Girl from the Other Side, by Nagab, and this was a really sweet one. So I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. It's YA fantasy published by Seven Seas Entertainment in 2017, and we're following, it says, once upon a time in a land far away there were 2 kingdoms, the outside where twisted beasts roamed that could curse with a touch, and the inside where humans lived in safety and peace. The girl and the beast should never have met, but when they do, a quiet fairy tale begins. This is a story of 2 people, one human and one inhuman, who linger in the hazy twilight that separates night from day. This was absolutely charming. I enjoyed the bridge that it had between the gothic and the quaint kind of slice of life storytelling. I thought that was such an interesting combination that really worked. The art style was beautiful. It's like this black and white kind of gentle, soft style that I feel like also really captured the essence of the tale, but it wasn't super clear as to who was speaking at times, like where the speech bubbles and that were. I was a little bit confused. I think it's something that I would get used to as I go on through the series, where characters become a bit more distinct, but I was a little bit confused at times if it wasn't obvious who was talking. But yeah, definitely will be continuing with this at some point in the future. Back to some of the library books now. Oh, let me just charge up my camera for a little bit. Okay, I've since begun boiling potatoes, so hopefully I don't forget that that's what's happening. Right, where was I? Black Flamingo. Another one that I borrowed out from the library. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. It is by Dean Atta. It's YA poetry, published in 2019 by Howdee-haie Children's Books. The story of Michael, who goes through his life kind of learning about himself, his identity, both sexual and like his heritage and identity in that regards. And he basically, the build up is to him finding himself in the drag community. So yeah, it was awesome. It's kind of written in verse. It's like snippets of his life as he grows. It was awesome. Yeah, it was super powerful, relatable on so many levels. Like the conversations about like fetishization between like interracial couples or just in general was, oh my god, I was like, wow, okay, wow. It was phenomenal. The conversations about like how people see you, like not black enough, too black, all these sort of things, like, oh my god, everything amazing. It felt very memoir-esque in tone, and by that I mean like it felt really believable. I thought the author was drawing some inspiration from his own life, and he says it's completely like a work of fiction. Maybe there's some things that are a little bit similar to his own like stories of upbringing and that, but it is a work of fiction. But yeah, I absolutely adored that one. I was surprised by like the size of it. It's quite short. It was like the size of this book, which is strange because I don't know, it just looks like a weirdly short book. Is that just me? I'm not sure. Next up, I decided to revisit a series that I read years ago, and that is The Red Pyramid, but it's the graphic novel version by Rick Riordan, adapted by Orpheus Kohler. It's YA fantasy by Puffin Books, published in 2015, and this is the adaptation of the Kane Chronicles in graphic novel form. So I've got the other two to get to eventually, but yeah, basically Rick Riordan's like the man of myth. He goes into like Egyptology in this one, and he's talking about like the ancient Egypts. Oh hey girl. And yeah, that's the kind of premise for this. So Carter and Sadie Kane's dad is a brilliant Egyptologist with a secret plan that goes horribly wrong. An explosion shatters the ancient Rosetta Stone and unleashes Set, the evil god of chaos. Set imprisons Dr. Kane in a golden coffin, and Carter and Sadie have to run for their lives to save their dad. They must embark on a terrifying quest from Cairo and Paris to the American Southwest and discover the truth about their family's connection to the House of Life, an Egyptian temple of magic that has existed for thousands of years. So yeah, it was really cool to actually see the magic in this like happening like on the page, like with the avatar fighting and stuff, which makes sense if you read it. It was, I feel like I maybe struggled to really get to grips with that in my head reading it like years ago. I'm just hypothesizing now, but I feel like it made it much clearer and more vivid, like seeing it in real life, if that makes sense. It was definitely an enjoyable experience revisiting the story in this way. I gave it 3 stars, I can't remember if I said, but yeah, it's not as immersive a tale as I recall initially feeling back when I read the regular novels. Picked up Sului by Lupita, and I'm so sorry I cannot pronounce her surname. She is an awesome actress. Illustrated by Vashti Harrison. It focuses on race, it's children's fiction, identity, that sort of thing. Published in 2019 by Puffin. Sului has skin the colour of midnight. She is darker than everyone in her family. She is darker than anyone in her school. Sului just wants to be beautiful and bright like her mother and sister. Then a magical journey in the night sky opens her eyes and changes everything. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. It nearly made me cry. It was just so beautiful. It had this gentle but real conversation on like colorism within the black community, self-hatred in children in particular. The art really complemented the story's tone. I absolutely loved it. I will definitely be revisiting this, keeping it like, oh, I think it's just such a relatable book. I loved it. It was great. And yeah, that was another 5-star read, which is awesome. Then I picked up Heads of the Coloured People by Nafissa Thompson Spires, which I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I feel like this is another book that has been on my TBR for quite a while. It focuses on black identity, it's short stories, fictional. I'd say it's more aimed at adults perhaps. Published by Chatto and Windus in 2019. And we have a collection of, I want to say 8 or 12 short stories, all really various. Like, so there's a one about a YouTuber who's being bullied in real life for the content that she's making. There's this one that a nurse is worn down by the demand of the skills of the funeral singer. There's like the cosplay community. There's so many different walks of life. It really hit me in the feels from the first story, and it definitely set the tone of kind of the content we were going to get. Again, really relatable pieces in here. Excellent exploration of not only like traumatic and intense situations within the black community, but everyday normal life as well, which was so refreshing to read. I really enjoyed that. And yeah, would heavily recommend this one. Right, next up we have The Bearded Dragons, Facts and Advice on Care and Breeding by Richard and Patricia Bartlett. This one I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. This one I actually borrowed from work. It's non-fiction, published by Barron's Educational Series in 1991, and it's basically a bearded dragon care guide. So some very basic, easy to understand information, which was good. It was easily accessible, helpful photos to kind of go along with what it was saying, but there was some out of date, like obviously out of date information and discrepancies in some practices, such as like feeding and things like that. But it was decent. It did the job. It was some sound basic knowledge. Right, on to the last book. I don't know which book was my favourite. I don't know how to feel right now. Oh, I had so many good reads. But yes, last book, here we come, and that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which is an adult gothic classic, first published in 1938, and this is the Virago edition, and it was a 5-star read for me. Oh my god. I think I want to do a full review on this at some point, a full video review, but just a few points. Fantastic use of imagery, excellent atmosphere, fantastic cast of characters, unsettling, well written. Really enjoyed the dynamics in this. We're basically following an unnamed narrator who is married to a very wealthy man called Maxim de Winter. She is, you don't know exactly, like it doesn't explicitly say, but she's much younger than him, and she's very like naive. She's come from a very different walk of life compared to him, and basically she gets to Mandalay, where he is like that's his estate, he owns it, and she just feels completely haunted by his first wife, Rebecca, in everything, every substance, every movement, her way of life in Mandalay house is just heavily influenced and overshadowed by Rebecca's legacy. And it's thrilling, it's gothic, it's chilling. There is romance in there, but I wouldn't say it's a romance. I don't know, there's just, yeah, it's so much in here. Amazing. I actually think this and The Queen of Shadows were my 2 favourites of February. So yeah, those are all the books that I read during February. As I say, I'm probably at some point going to be doing a full dedicated review for this, so keep an eye out if you're interested in more thoughts. Let's quickly whiz over to the books that I'm hoping to read during March. So 2 of them I'm already in the middle of. I'm currently reading Shuva by Junji Ito, which has, I want to say, 9 short stories of his in here. They're all very different. Horror, creepy, really frightening manga. So yeah, I'm currently on like the 4th or 3rd story in here, halfway through. I'm also currently reading, admittedly I started early, but I'm reading A Tale of Sorcery by Chris Colfer, which is the 3rd book, and currently the most current and last book of this series, which I'm going to be buddy reading with Kat from Kat's Reading Corner. But I kind of want to get a head start because I know, like, well, from my experience last month, I just kind of fell off and didn't read it, and yeah, like, I want to kind of keep with the flow this time round. Beautiful naked cover. I've just got the dust jacket off, but that is stunning, isn't it? So yeah, we're continuing on with this. I'm currently on page 145. I started it today. So I've read quite a bit. Did I start it today? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I started it today. Oh, quite impressed with myself. Also hoping to do a buddy read with my cousin, just a very chill one, and that is for The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. It is during the Trojan War, I do believe, so I'm guessing it's kind of a reimagining. I'm hoping it kind of stays a little bit factual, not that I would notice if it didn't. I love Greek mythology, but I don't know actual historical events that well. But I'm hoping, yeah, they do justice for the women that have been shoved to the side. I also have another buddy read, and me and Deborah from Hills of Books are jumping back to the Smoke Thieves series. So we're doing every other month a book from the Smoke Thieves trilogy, and then in between those months that we're not doing that, we're doing Daughter of Smoke and Bone. So yeah, we're going between the 2 of those. So picking up the 2nd book in the Smoke Thieves trilogy, and that is Demon World by Sally Green. And then 2 books that I just want to kind of gravitate towards, I guess. I'm interested in picking them up relatively soon. I have Philip K. Dick's A Maze of Death. This is one of the science fiction Masterworks editions, which are pretty cool. This one just says, when 14 people arrive to colonise the otherwise uninhabited planet of Delmark O, they quickly discover that their bizarre new world is more dangerous and much, much stranger than they could ever have imagined. The colonists have nothing in common and no idea why they've been sent there. All they know is that there's no way to leave, and one by one they are being killed. Oh, I also have a book that my colleague at work is loaning me. It's The Tower of Babel, and I can't remember who it's by, and I can't remember exactly what it's about. I just remember that it's a 4-book series and they're relatively short, and he's been really hyping them up to me, so he said he'd borrow them to me, he'd lend them to me to see what I think. So I should have those come in at some point this week. And then lastly, I'm hoping to get to Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology. This is, I love all sorts of mythology, but I think out of like the more spoken about in the Western Hemisphere at least, like Egyptian, Greek and Norse is the one I know the least amount of, I would say. So yeah, I'll be interested to see how this is explored. So yeah, that is my wrap up and my TBR. As usual, let me know if you've read any of these books yourself, any thoughts and feelings. I would love to hear them. But for now, I shall speak to you in another video soon. Bye!